Good morning. This is Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., 7:50 a.m. on your radio dial. We're here this morning with Tim Sauers. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in St. Nazianz, Wisconsin right now, a little town north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Tim is with us this morning. He has a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin. He also is certified in the Montessori approach to education, and he has a degree in early childhood exceptional education. We're talking with Tim this morning because he has done something unique, and that is put a Montessori school integrated into the public school system, which is quite unique feat. Tim, how did that happen? First, tell us a little bit about Montessori for those who are listening who don't know.
Let's talk about the public school and McDowell Montessori School just for a second.
Okay.
The question of how did it happen? How did Milwaukee Public Schools begin an alternative in the large 110 student population public school system in Milwaukee? It happened way back in '76, so we were really celebrating the 23rd, 24th year of its existence, and it happened through a court order, as many court orders across the nation ordered school systems to desegregate. And in Milwaukee, the superintendent at the time decided, rather than do force busing, as some were doing, that Milwaukee would develop a series of continuums, a series of schools starting in kindergarten all the way through high school. It would be thematic. There would be a Montessori school. There possibly could be other specialty schools in art. And we have multi-language version schools. So it happened way back in '76. So that's how it happened. Right now we have 3 Montessori schools in the Milwaukee Public School System. And so we can talk about that during the broadcast, and I'd love to share more about how it went on. Montessori itself is a form of education developed by the educator Maria Montessori, Italy, way back in 1905, 1910. She died in 1952. It's a form of education very much based on the individual child and the individual child's directions, and we want to follow the child, the student. And so Montessori tried to individualize and then concretize education as much as possible. I know these are just words, and talk about that a little bit more too, but I have been involved for the last 30 years in the Montessori movement in the United States, mostly as an early childhood teacher. I am, we call ourselves Children's House Directors or Directresses. It means that I was trained back in 1970 in Palo Alto, California, to get a degree as a Montessori director, and that is my main field, is the early childhood field, and the Montessori form of that education is really what I've been doing for 30 years. My other degrees highlight that. I have a degree, my master's degree is in exceptional education, as you said, language and learning disabilities, and another degree in exceptional education for young children.
Now, Maria Montessori was the first female physician in Italy. She had a feat of her own there, and then she went on to develop the Montessori process. I, by the way, also am Montessori certified from St. Nicholas in England. I know you didn't know that. She began her Montessori schools from the small province in Italy, not as a physician, from a physician's point of view, studying exceptional children. Isn't that correct?
It is. Actually, she came to Montessori, or to education, as a scientist rather than an educator.
Which gives education a different perspective, and what we do here is to look at integrated systems from education from different points of view. And what we're doing these days is talking about best practices, Montessori being one of them. Now let's talk about how the Montessori curriculum, what did you do in Wisconsin there are many exceptions to the Montessori rule with regard to public school and the way a public school is structured.
Yes.
So how did you differentiate, and how were you able to bypass the laws in Wisconsin in order to be able to get the Montessori curriculum in that area?
Well, actually, the school system itself was being ordered to desegregate. The superintendent at the time was open to developing a different series of specialty kind of alternatives for the system. And so we had the openness from within. It was being forced by the legal system, and it was being fostered by the superintendent. So we had that. We also had a very enlightened early childhood specialist. Grace Akalucci was her name, who was not a Montessorian. She was head of the early childhood department in Milwaukee Public Schools, but she was very favorable to Montessori, and she saw the wisdom of not just trying to plop down a Montessori school, full-blown, all grades right away, but to build slowly. So we started really with just our early childhood classrooms, and were able to evolve into, over a period of time, about an 8-year period of time, a full Montessori school, starting at K3 going through 8th grade. So that allowed us some time to do what you're asking. How did we adjust ourselves to the system, and how did we help the system bend its rules or change its rules to adjust to us?
Because one of the prerequisites is in the Montessori classroom is that different ages, for example, are in the same classroom.
3-year span, so that 3, 4, and 5-year-olds are together, our first, second, and third graders are together, and so on. Our 4th, 5th, 6th graders are together, and then our 7th and 8th are together. So there's a multi-aging, and that was very, very new to the public system. But it wasn't, it wasn't forbidden. There wasn't any large laws in the saying that you couldn't do it. So a lot of what we were able to do was put the Montessori system in place in a large school system, I think mainly because of their willingness to change, the willingness to open up and try something different.
And that makes a very big difference.
Yes, and that's really unique. I mean, many Montessori schools have been, not many, but there have been Montessori schools started in other large communities. And I think they've had different political reasons to start them or whatever, but they have not had the time to grow that Milwaukee gave our public school.
Well, also let's remember that, and tell our audience that Montessori schools are basically private schools in the United States, not part of public school systems.
30 years ago, they were all private schools.
Yes.
The first school that I worked at was called Highland Community School, a small, private, inner-city neighborhood school, and it actually has become the first charter school in the Milwaukee public school system. So, counting Highland, we have 4 Montessori schools in the Milwaukee.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about uniqueness. Tim Sawyer's name is always mentioned when uniqueness, I'm sorry, Sauers' name is always mentioned when it comes to uniqueness and somebody to talk to with regard to blending public and innovative programs. Tell us a little bit about your feelings and interpretations, how you view, for example, parents in the classroom.
Oh, I'd love to. Let me say first, if I could, that Tim Sauers is just one little part of the Milwaukee public school system, that I can't presume to speak for the whole Milwaukee public school system, and certainly not trying to do that right now. I'm really just speaking for myself. But what I knew 30 years ago, and I was just so taken with the Montessori theory when I began reading it, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, and it all kind of came together, was that the system itself, the Montessori system, was built on 2 things, one of which was really following the needs of the child, which I did not see happening, and certainly in my education as I grew, and in the education that I was perceiving was out there, the school system that my daughters would be going to. So I knew I needed to do something about that. And the other thing was that, in the late 60s, early 70s, empowerment became such a focus. And for me, one of the reasons schools had really swayed or gone away from their main objective is they weren't including parents. They were actually isolating and depowering parents. And so the main thing that I've been involved in is parent empowerment. That the first school that I worked with, Highland Community School, and if I look at myself as doing anything, it's building different schools that have withstood the test of time. Highland was a neighborhood school. We called it Highland Community School, not Highland Montessori School, because we wanted to emphasize the community aspect, and it was a parent-run, parent-staffed in many ways school. Now that has evolved over time, but it is still parent-directed and parent-run. So I guess if you hear Tim Sauers' name, hopefully it's in relationship to those two things. When I first went to the Milwaukee Public Schools back in 1976, and we were beginning, I was the first coordinator of McDowell, the first Montessori school there in the nation, actually, in the public school system. It was real clear to me that we didn't just want to make this another form of education, although I believe in Montessori education very much, but we wanted to empower the parents of the children to really give us the direction of where we wanted to go with this. So, that was something that we worked at very hard from the very beginning, and that was one of the hardest parts for the Milwaukee Public Schools to accept. Of course, they wanted a method of education that would attract parents, and of course Montessori did that. It was mostly private education at the time, but the Milwaukee Public Schools and the other folks in the state didn't want to hear about empowering parents as much. So that was the challenge.
I was just thinking, a flash came through my mind. Isn't Milwaukee School District considered one of the top 10 in the United States?
Oh, it is, definitely.
That's what I thought. Let's go back to something you said earlier about their two main goals. Following the needs of the child. How do you follow the needs of the child? What does that mean, and how does it look?
Well, you mentioned that Montessori came into education as a doctor first and as a scientist. And a scientist really studies what they are looking at, studies what they are trying to find. And I guess that's what I think Montessori did. She actually looked at the different developmental stages. We call them, stages of development in the child's life. And they change. Of course, the 0 to 6-year-old child has a very specific way of approaching the world, an absorbent way of taking in the world. The 6 to 12-year-old child wants to know everything about everything in the world, the cosmic child, we call him. The adolescent has a different need in an education system, and is certainly preparing the young adult in high school for the work world, and the world of a career is very different. And yet, in the past, because we got away from being child-centered, we were industrial. The industrial age dictated what education would be. We did not follow the child, and so we weren't meeting the needs of the child. We were just being, and maybe you went to public school like I did, and the teacher was the main source of authority. They had that authority from the state, and they were told what to teach us. And what we wanted to do in the alternative school movement, and certainly in Montessori, and Dr. Montessori wanted to do it very clearly, was turn that around. Really look at the child and look at the needs of the child, and then develop an education system based on each one of those separate stages of development. Does that help?
Yes, and the needs of the child being, let's define a little bit for our audience how that looks in terms of the regular classroom. It is not a teacher standing up in front of the classroom teaching with a curriculum textbook, telling children what to do, having them sit still, that type of modeling.
Those directors or directresses, because we allow, or the Montessori method allows in the classroom, a lot of movement, a lot of freedom of movement. Montessori felt that the hand was the prime viaduct to learn, that to use your hand, to use your imagination, you needed to be able to move. So she allows movement in the classroom, and our classroom is actually a prepared environment. We have developed, through the years, Montessori developed a whole set of cognitive teaching materials that are very concrete. They're very hands-on. If you want to learn math in Montessori, you don't do it on paper. You do it with rods and beads, and you do it very young. If you want to learn to read in Montessori, you don't do it from a blackboard and from C. Jane Run books, but you do it from early on with phonetics and a movable alphabet that you can actually manipulate. And so the materials become central within a Montessori classroom. The interaction of the students together with the materials becomes the way that they follow their interests, really. And the teacher then, the director or directress, his role is to really, over a 3-year period, because we already mentioned the multi-aging, to follow that child and to see, okay, now little Timmy here has not been working in this area. I will direct him back to that area to really, but to be first respectful of the child's choice, the student's choice.
You are listening to Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski, 7:50 a.m. on your radio dial, WAAT. We are here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., and we're here with Tim I almost did it again. Tim Sauers from Wisconsin, who's talking about the Milwaukee public schools and how they have changed and become one of the top 10 public schools in the United States with their alternative thinking methods. Now, I said alternative, and generally people think of alternative as at risk, so I'm going to say progressive.
Exactly.
So let's go on with now, how do parents play a role in the classroom? Do they come into the classroom every day? Do they assist the teacher? Do they make policies and procedures? It seems that every school we have spoken to in the last several months has a different view on what a community school is and who operates and runs it. Some people have democratic schools where the children make the policies and procedures along with the teachers. How do parents become involved in and because it is difficult to get parents to become involved in the classroom. They're all so busy. How do you do that? What does that look like?
Well, actually, in the Milwaukee Public Schools, in our school, McDowell Montessori School, parent involvement is real diverse. It starts out, and we get the children at 3 years old, so you have to remember that we are a citywide specialty. The parents choose to send their children to our school or one of the other 3 or 4 Montessori schools, 3 Montessori schools. So the choice is there first, and we, even before their child's in the school, we have just held parent orientation. So for new parents, we'll do an evening, which we have almost 100% attendance at. And at that time, we pass out a directory and we give parents an overview, first of what Montessori is about, but second, what their role in the school can be and hopefully will be. We have a site-based management system in Milwaukee so that every school, while we're still part of a larger Milwaukee public school system, every school has the autonomy to its own budget, to many of its own hiring practices, and parents then are a majority on what's called the site-based management council. That council does oversee the role of the principal. It does oversee the bylaws and the goals and accomplishments of the school. So that is the first and kind of the higher aspiration that we want parents to look at, is to be on the site-based management and to be on that with a real clear understanding of what the school's about and what a good school is all about. And so you can go from there all the way down to just a wide series of Montessori education classes, parent education classes, classes on discipline, classes on how to help your children at home. So we have, that whole range. In between, and your question specifically was about parents in the classroom. In Montessori, the classroom is just the staging ground for the school. Many of our students learn by going out. That is a term that we use in our elementary program and our adolescent program, going out. Going outside, you mean? Pardon? Going outside. Going out means as they get research-based, as they become interested in any topic, I don't care if it's dinosaurs or butterflies or the Milwaukee sewage system, whatever it is, that they then form a group of 4 or 5 students. They connect with a parent who's willing to take them or go with them on the city bus to what they want to study, and they go do research on it. So parents are very, very much involved in the educational system, not really coming into the classroom and sitting down at a desk and helping someone read, but much more in the realm of helping us with what we call our going outs. And it is going outside, although it's definitely just with a specific idea in mind. The children have to present it, the students present it to the teacher, and the teacher okays it, and then we go through the process of getting bus tickets, and the parent goes along. So we have a lot of parents involved in the going out process of the education. There are parents, of course, that are involved in anything from the PTA to Busing Appreciation Day to our large mini Olympics Day to all of the different programs that we have in the school. We have a...
All right, you piqued my interest. What's
All right.
Busing Appreciation Day, please?
Busing Appreciation Day is a wonderful day. We have a... because we're
celebrating busing?
Oh, it is praising busing. I know. We are eliminating it across the board, and here I'm saying praise it. No, we are a citywide school. Most of our students come from every area of the city of Milwaukee, and some suburban students come into our school. And so they're bused. And those bus drivers do a yeoman's job. They really, through our Wisconsin winters and everywhere else, on all kinds of different weather, they get those children safely to and from school. So Busing Appreciation Day is a day that the whole school, parent-based, and that they organize it, but the whole school cooks cookies, and we have a breakfast for the bus drivers.
What a great idea.
It comes out of the idea of community, and I haven't really talked about that a lot.
Well, I hope we're going to do that.
I'd like to, because we see a culture of the school being sharing by all the members of the school and the community. So the bus drivers are there too.
Well, most of our best practices schools, called community schools for the most part, all participate in some way in community functions and reaching out to the community. What ways does the Highland Montessori School reach out to the community?
Well, Highland, from 1968 on, has defined itself as a neighborhood community school.
But you said your children were bused.
And Highland's a different school than McDowell.
Okay.
So we're really talking about two schools.
Okay.
Highland Community School was the first school that I was affiliated with. In fact, I've spent 20 of my almost 30 years working with. And Highland is now, and it's a small school, 100 students. It is the first charter school in the school system. It is Montessori, but it is very different than the McDowell Montessori School, which I helped begin back in '76 as the first coordinator, and then where I'm at again now.
How many students are in McDowell?
And McDowell has 650 students, so we are a large city school, inner city school. Highland, as far as the parent involvement goes and how they define community, is much different than a large school like McDowell. Highland defines itself as about a 10 square block area. The whole school was developed to just serve a very, very specific area in Milwaukee. And from that area, all the students came, and the parents themselves, who have the power, they're on the board of directors to run the school, follow those admission policies. And so that's one thing. McDowell, of course, is a citywide school, so we draw our students from all over the city. And how do you define a community when you have a city of 700,000 people and you're getting just a few of the students, 600 of the students? We define our community at McDowell much more as an adult-student relationship to empower each other to learn. So we put learning, education at the center of the definition of community at McDowell. At Highland, we put the neighborhood as the first. I mean, learning certainly was a very powerful part of Highland Community School, but neighborhood development and neighborhood revitalization was the goal. So I hope I'm not confusing those two.
No, and I wanted to ask you your personal opinion then. I didn't realize there was such a diverse number of students between Highland and McDowell. I assume them both to be small schools, and McDowell is certainly not a small school.
Oh no, we're not a small school. We're too big.
And so you're really not a neighborhood school.
McDowell is a citywide specialty school.
Ah, now give us your personal opinion.
Yep.
The difference between give us your personal opinion between having 650 students and 100 students. What do you're able to give us a perception in the next 3 minutes of the compare and contrast having 650 students and 100 students?
Well, actually, it is my personal opinion, and it is that McDowell is cool. I think we're doing a wonderful job. I think, we are. And yet as I look at my career with both of these schools, Highland Community School is now enlarging itself. It's going to about 150, 170 students. And I think that is about an ideal size. It allows each family to feel very much a part of the school. It allows the school to know who's having difficulty and who isn't, and how to meet each individual's needs. At McDowell, 650 students is a lot of students. And I think you would be amazed, and certainly all the visitors to the school are amazed, that the beauty of the school, the beauty of the students, the beauty of the exceptional learning environment that you walk into when you walk into that big school. But you can get lost in the school of 650, and there are times when we wish that we were smaller. So that's a real quick one. I tend to want to favor the smaller school, although I'm very, very committed to making large public Montessori schools in the system.
Well, I think that what we've learned over the last 25 years is that small schools tend to be much more manageable on many different levels, not just the problems that exist in terms of prevention and being able to see problems and deal with them before they escalate, but as well to get to know the students. Part of the problem in many of our cases of the children in large schools, and the schools become larger and larger. When we think of Littleton with 2,000 students,
yes, exactly,
children become a number and a face.
Right.
And so the smaller schools, we believe here, is a movement that we need to come back to, and most of the successful schools and the successful public schools around the world and around the United States are much smaller, and we find less than 300 students. That's a manageable size for a neighborhood school.
Oh, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I would counter, though, that the very basis of Montessori, which is what we started talking about, was the multi-aging, the fact that each one of us lives together for 3 years in a classroom setting, a prepared environment with each other. That goes a long way to getting to know each other. Part of the depersonalization of a large school is that everybody is shuttled around every year, and that it just happens that when you do that, even if you did that in a school of 300,
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We're talking about the Milwaukee public schools and how they've integrated different models into the public schools. You can hear Children Come First every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. on WAAT Radio. The show is produced by Earth Heart Foundation, a nonprofit organization with offices in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New Mexico. You can contact us at 570-639-2931. That's 570-639-2931, or email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids, PROKIDS, at rlc.net. Join us again for the second half hour, and we'll be talking about the Milwaukee Public Schools, one of the top 10 public schools in the nation. This is Daria Brzezinski, and we'll return in a moment.
This is going to sound corny, but I just wanted to tell the world.
Brzezinski. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., WAAT 750 a.m. on your radio dial. Today we're here with Tim Sauers from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Milwaukee being one of the top 10 school districts in the United States. And we're talking about the alternatives that are in the Milwaukee school system. And Tim has been involved in the Montessori public school, Montessori schools being private schools basically around the nation. Tim, we were talking about large schools and comparing and contrasting large and small schools. How do large schools, like the McDowell Montessori School, public school, sow the seeds of gentleness? I mean, it's very difficult to do that when you have a very large school.
Thank you.
And by the way, those are Tim's words, sowing seeds of gentleness.
Are my words. We talk so much now in the education community and certainly in our society and on the street about the violence that goes on in our school system and the shootings you alluded to and all the anger, it would seem, that people walk around with. And yet, when we really talk about nonviolence or how to create a culture, how to help our culture, which is very, it tends to be a very competitive culture, how to help our culture and our students, the students and the children that come up within the American culture, become more gentle, become less violent or more nonviolent. We talk about community again, and I know we, in this interview, have talked a little bit about a community school, a neighborhood school, and the role of parents. But when we talk about changing a culture, and really when I talk to students and when I talk to parents, I always use the term that we are in a remedial stage, that we really are working within the larger society, our American society, that tends to not be feeling-based as well. It doesn't teach our students very well how to cooperate together, to
care for each other,
work together and care for each other. We're in this remedial stage, and how do we build a culture, a school, that can actually foster that? And we have done it several ways. We usually have a theme for the year. Maybe it'd be sharing and caring, or as you said, the word caring. It might be reaching out to our community. We take themes for the year. But more than that, we begin to look upon everybody in the school as an aid to life, that our role is to be gentle. Our role as teachers, as principals, as all the different people that work within the public school system in our building. Our role is to really give a model to these students of another way, to show them how they can solve their conflicts creatively and nonviolently, to show them how much fun it is to just get together and sing, and to have parents in for we have monthly family-orientated outings at the school that we all get together, or many of us get together on Saturdays and with our children and go to. Sowing seeds of gentleness then becomes a theme for building within the school respect. And it is the bottom line, I think, and it's certainly the principal of our school has it as her creed, and I hope we do as a multitude of adults that are in the building, have it as our creed that every time we work with any child, and we come together and we, from the very beginning, respect their needs, listen to them, and if they are in trouble or if there's a problem or if there's a fight, that we approach that with a form of understanding that they can first feel heard, that they know that they're being heard, and second, we will then allow them to understand what our rules are in the building. So sowing seeds of gentleness happens across the board in our school.
This is basically contrary to our entire society and the images that children receive from everywhere, from sports to Nintendo to the TV.
Mm-hmm.
It
is very much so.
Gentleness and compassion and caring are not something our culture has been working towards. And interestingly enough, I've been working with the inmates at many of the institutions, the correctional institutions, and one of the things they talk to me about is the fact that children coming up today who are incarcerated have no conscience and are scary because they don't have any remorse. And one of the issues about gentleness and kindness and compassion in that area, it tends to help children to get in touch with those kinds of feelings.
Very much so. We have a large conflict resolution program in our building. It's run by the students, and they are our mediators, and there's a whole process by when there's a fight on the playground. And really, I think you would be amazed, and I would invite your listeners to come if they could at all possibly, because we have a school with a culture of getting along very well with each other and respecting each other. And certainly when I talk about the fights or the mediation that goes on, and we're a large school, we have that also, but the students run a conflict resolution program. There is just a lot of ways within the building that we as McDowell Montessori people, and that's what we like to call ourselves, McDowell Montessori people, work together to assist each other to be better human beings.
Well, it sounds to me like you're developing skills for life rather than just teaching to the brain of the child. You're developing the kinds of skills that they're going to need rather than having an argument and running to the teacher to
Right.
have defined what the roles are and what the outcome will be. The children and then develop it through mediation. I happen to also be a certified mediator. Through mediation.
Montessori's definition of education is an aid to life.
Yes.
That when we want to give our gift to a child, which is to help them learn and orientate themselves to the next, to be the next generation, when we want to pass on the gift of what we have to give to a child, we're really aiding them. If we just burden them with the strong winds, or take what you take anything you can get, no one's going to give you anything, or some of the old cliches that we'd like to throw out. We're just it is a burden. It's not an aid. It's not a way of helping them in our 21st century looking society of the diversity and of inclusion. It's not a way at all of training them to solve their problems, to get along, to work together, and to, in a cooperative mode, which is, of course, what many of our institutions, our businesses now are learning to go much more to, in a cooperative mode, work together. We know with brain research, I have a lot of experience doing it over the years, but what excites me is that the brain research that's coming along is saying the same thing, that collaboration and inclusion of people together, working together from many different backgrounds, sort of is a spark to imagination, and then imagination leading into experimentation into learning. And those kinds of sparks don't happen if you don't help young people in our society to talk to each other in a way that's civil, that is, we call it grace and courtesy. What a basic concept, And so we try to mirror that, we try to model it for everyone, but we also set up mediators in ways that if it does break down, that we keep ourselves in the right direction.
And it seems to me the traditional educational model was not one of collaboration and inclusion, but rather competition and win-win, not win-win, but win-lose. So you are doing something very uniquely different in the entire model of the Montessori, and also I must say that when we're talking about caring and gentleness, that we're bringing into the affective domain of the child, which is the right brain, which is something that most traditional public schools do not do. They do not address the affective, the emotions, the intuition, the imagination of the child, which the Montessori philosophy does.
Well, I agree, and I think many of our schools are playing catch-up. In the 70s, when we began talking about Montessori in the public system and alternative forms or of education, community-based education, there was not a lot of research to back up the validity of those things. We had maybe a gut feeling, or it came out of the 60s and people wanted to try it, but there wasn't much research to back it up. Now the research is there, and certainly when we look at learning and brain research on learning, the models of the autocratic model, the top-down education, don't say anything, don't sit in your seat and do what you're told, those fall by the wayside. And so I think we're in a catch-up mood. I think more and more and more schools, not because necessarily they want to, but they're being forced to really accept the fact that the changes in education, the change towards empowering the student, the change towards allowing the student to explore and to work together with students to do experiential learning kinds of things, not only does that produce what we wanted to produce out of the old system, a competent, knowledgeable reading, writing student, but it also produces a person who is able to be flexible, is able to move into the next generation when not going to have the same rigidity of the industrial age. And I hope I'm not being too abstract, because I don't want to be.
Well, what amazes me is that the progression of education is the same, seems to hold true with regard to the way the latest brain-mind research is, which is the intuitive, the intuition and the imagination come first, and then the factual comes second. So here we have schools that have been developed for the last quarter of a century based on gut instinct, their own imagination, their own intuition in the way they thought learning take place, with no scientific statistical backing, just gut feeling.
Yep.
And here we are. These are the success models. And now, because we have scientific data to back up and prove what you are doing is right, now we're taking it seriously. So our whole culture is assigned scientific, prove it to me status, rather than allowing people to look at their gut feeling, look at their intuition, which is what our great thinkers and what our great entrepreneurs have been saying for
Exactly.
centuries.
I find it exciting. And it is, I say that very optimistically in the midst of some of the violence we see in our schools and some of the horror stories we hear. But as a statistic that you might be interested in is that we do have 3 Montessori schools in the Milwaukee public school system now. A 4th school, which is Highland Community School, is a charter Montessori school, so we have 4. That encompasses 2,500 students. And the Montessori schools are given the fact that we just talked about the Montessori system as being one that would be much more non-traditional, right? They are the ones, those 4 schools are the ones in most demand across the whole system in Milwaukee, which has got a lot of different alternatives.
Do you have Waldorf schools there?
Pardon?
Do you have Waldorf schools there?
We have a Waldorf school here in Milwaukee in the public school system. We do. So the Montessori schools are most in demand, and they are on par with the very best school, quote-unquote, score-wise, which is the Gifted and Talented program in Milwaukee. So our students are scoring on a par with the Gifted and Talented students. They are chosen citywide at random, rather than chosen for their gifted and talented skills. And so we're really proud of the fact that not only are we doing Montessori within the public school system, we are providing the top quality education within the Milwaukee public school system. And that is being recognized. The board of directors our board of directors are very, very interested in creating more Montessori schools. So I only see that can grow. And so I'm hopeful, and I'm very, very, I'm not surprised. I mean, we're talking about how it is interesting over the last 25 years that now we're getting the scientific research to validify the practices, the best practices that some of us in Montessori and certainly in the other schools that have been experimenting, many of them have been doing for a while. But it is very gratifying to have some of that hard-based proof now,
You are listening to Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski, WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. You can reach us if you'd like to speak with any of our speakers or know something about them, or if you have suggestions on anyone you'd like to have on. Please call us at 570-639-2931. That's 570-639-2931, or email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids@rlc.net. One of the most intriguing things to me, and you talked about testing, and I have some comments about testing, but we won't go into that one. But these schools tend to allow a lot more freedom to students, to children, and to parents. What kinds of attitudes do you have and beliefs about children's rights?
Well, actually, I think that when you talk about children's rights, you talk about the needs of children. And so my attitude to children's rights is that if you see a need, a developmental need that is inherent in a student at a certain age, that the right then follows. And it is our responsibility as adults to make sure that need is met and those rights are honored. We've talked about rights a lot in our world, in our society, but I don't think there's a clearer area of rights than children's rights, because the needs of a 0 to 6-year-old have been very clearly understood for a long time. The need to move, the need to talk and to use language, the need to safety and security, the need to caring and nurturing. Those needs, if not met, are traumatic and cause serious harm. So those children have needs, and then the rights for them to be met become imperative for us as adults. That we have, there's no clearer link to me in our society of a need-based right than the child. And then it's the same with the 6 to 12-year-old student and an adolescent age student, and I think those needs are not understood very well. And it's a shame. Montessori talks about them a lot. Many educators are talking about those needs a lot. Certainly brain research talks about those needs, and why we can't translate those needs into rights, demands that we as a society focus on children and meet those and make all of our priorities meeting those needs. I don't quite understand, but they deserve being fought for.
Well, I think we've come far away. We've taken philosophies and principles that we've heard over the years, and we've really stretched them. The rubber band is stretched, and I think what's happening is that it's about to come back on us. And I personally believe that in watching and having observed many of the schools that we've been talking to around the United States and the world, what we have missed is the fact that we keep trying to fit children into a mold that parents and adults perceive as where they need to be, rather than allowing them the opportunity to develop the skills they are born with and capitalizing on those skills. And so what we tend to constantly do is take what we think children need to learn and impose it on them, rather than looking at where they are, where they need to be, and where they need to go. And I think that's part of a child's right as well, the right to be born with certain skills and talents and be able to use those skills and talents.
Yeah, and
our
for
children,
an environment to be created that they can then grow to be able to use those.
In the Montessori classroom, there are around the classroom are activities and tools for children to use that they can gravitate to and use at their own leisure. And they walk around the classroom, they pick up the materials, they begin to use them, they learn to put them back, they learn skills, they learn things like buttoning and at early ages, tying, zipping. These are the kinds of things that parents don't have time to teach. Brushing their teeth, combing their hair, washing their dishes, exactly. And parents who are in the hurried stage, as David Elkind aptly put it, we now have hurried children.
Hurried child, yeah.
We really lose much of the the basic skills that children need for life. And the Montessori classroom, I told the story once before, but when I was trained in the Montessori style, I'll never forget this. My first class, the Ms. Smiths brought at age 60 a book that was in the classroom. They passed it around to all of us, and I happened to look at the date of the book, and it was 50 years old. And after the book circulated the entire classroom, they was handed back to the Ms. Smiths, and they told us that book had been in their classroom for 30 years.
Yeah.
It looked brand new. I mean, I looked at it and knew that it was an old book, but it looked brand new. So they had taught the children, and they said this is a prime example of how the children in a Montessori classroom learn to respect what they have. And I think in our affluent society today, we have so much, and it's such a throwaway society, that children do not respect the materials, each other, or adults. And
forgive me.
Go ahead.
Students know that respect. And when they're given respect, and when they're given an environment when they're learning, as you said, moving and using the many, many multisensory skills, and they come to appreciate learning as well as the materials and the books. And when they feel respected and when they come to appreciating learning, then they really are able to, I think, move into what we talked about a little bit in the middle of this interview, which is cooperative.
Collaboration, inclusion.
Yes, cooperative styles of being together, rather than the stuff we see on television, the stuff that we see so often portrayed as what a child's about, this always making fun of each other and all the other things, the competitive nature. So, yes, respect for the child, and then the child in turn learning that learning is fun, finding out that it is enjoyable to learn, exciting to learn, and moving to the area of respect for each other. I think it is all intertwined.
Boy, that's one that's really been lost. The fun of learning. Fun of
education.
Yes. Why does learning have to be drudgery? It doesn't.
It should never be. It should never be. And there are times when we have to memorize things, and we may have to work hard at memorizing things. But to define it as drudgery is not going to get it in my brain any easier.
Exactly. And actually, we've known from the brain research that children who love and have fun at what they are doing integrate faster.
Of course.
And build more neurons in the brain.
Exactly. And then they hold it.
Exactly.
Because it's connected to different parts of their brain and different good experiences. And so, yes, this is very true.
Rather than in the traditional classroom where the student learns the information until the test is over.
Right. Exactly.
We have a little bit more time left, and I want to talk to you about summing up the Milwaukee Public Schools and talking about how they have integrated. What would you like to pass along the information to our listeners today?
Well, I think what I'd like to do in summary is just remind myself and remind everyone that when you're building a school, and that's what we talk about, building a school, building a community. It takes time. That we're tempted always in our society to say, oh, Montessori works, or this works, let's have one tomorrow, and then just try to create overnight a community that embodies some of the things we've been talking about this hour. The reality is that in the Milwaukee Public Schools, they have taken an approach that is very wise. And that is that they've allowed the Montessori schools and the other specialty schools to grow from the young student up. And we are now starting our third Montessori school. It's called Craig Montessori School. And we didn't do that by just plopping 600 students down in a building and saying, all right, this is a Montessori school. We did it by starting the 3- and 4-year-olds the first year, allowing them to mature to 5-year-olds, and now we're back creating the elementary program. We have a 1st and 2nd grade program now. So Montessori, I could talk about for another hour. I think it's a wonderful form of education. But I know that the key to it is built on aiding. It's built on looking at the child's life, being an aid to the child's life, not just stuffing knowledge somehow in a brain that is not wanting to be stuffed that way. So Montessori is real valid. We've seen in the public schools the success of Montessori and the methodology of Montessori, but we've also seen the success of trying to change the culture of a school, to incorporate parents, to empower parents, and then how that empowers the students and everyone in the building. So I hope that's the summary.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time out. What's the time difference between here and Milwaukee?
Well, it's an hour.
Is it? Oh, is that all it is?
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
We didn't have to get you up too early.
Oh, no.
We want to remind our audience that Children Come First is sponsored by CK Auto Supply with locations in Moosic, Scranton, Pittston, and Kingston. You can visit them on the World Wide Web at www.ceekayauto.com. We thank you, Tim, and we have a few minutes left, and we'd like to sum up that the Milwaukee Public Schools are one of the top 10 public schools in the United States. I didn't want to say this, but word tells me that they're number one as far as not only innovations, but as also as well in terms of the kinds of students that are graduating from their schools.
Hold up as a real model, that's for sure.
Yes, they are the model for the United States in terms of exceptions, trying innovations, and accomplishing the kinds of goals that educators are scrambling for across the nation today. And what we are talking about is the fact that the superintendent there, who by the way?
We have a brand new superintendent, actually, Mr. Corte, and he has just been hired, and but out of our system, he's been the director of one of the most successful community schools here in the city of Milwaukee, and now he's our superintendent of schools, and we're all excited that will mean more power for us community schools.
We have been talking to Tim Sauer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who's head of the McDowell School, the Montessori School. It's a public school in the...
I'm not the head of the McDowell School, but I do work with it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And you have also been in charge of Highland School,
Yes.
which is another charter Montessori school in the public school system of Milwaukee. We've been talking about children's rights, parents being involved in the classroom and the Montessori curriculum in general. And we'd like to thank Tim for being with us today. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much. I've really appreciated the chance to give my views on this, and I appreciate the chance that you've given me. Thank you.
And I'll be talking to you again. You have been listening to Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski on WAAT Radio, 750 AM on the dial. Our guest today is Tim Sauer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We've been talking about the Montessori public schools in the Milwaukee area and the fact that the Milwaukee schools are number one in the nation in terms of alternative and the kinds of things they've been doing in terms of innovations for children and a model for all of us across the United States. You can hear Children Come First every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. on WAAT Radio. The show is produced by Earth Heart Foundation, a nonprofit organization with offices in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New Mexico. You can contact us at 570-639-2931. That's 570-639-2931. Or email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids, PROKIDS, @rlc.net. Join us again next Tuesday at 10 a.m. on WAAT Radio for Children Come First. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski, and we'd like to extend to you a good day. Please have a good week. Reminding you that Children Come First is sponsored by CK Auto Supply with locations in Moosic, Scranton, Pittston, and Kingston. You can visit them on the World Wide Web at www.ceekayauto.com. That's ceekayauto.com. Please join us again next week when we will have another interesting guest regarding children and all of the aspects of children. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. Have a good day and have a good week.